All right, so we're going to talk about the difference between, I guess, teaching strategies and the function of schools versus one-on-one, I guess, parent-led instruction. There's a pretty huge difference between the two. When you're in a school setting or a teacher, first your job really is different than if you were a parent teaching your own kid. In a school setting, your job is to get as many of your students as possible to pass whatever state criteria it is. That's your job. There's no other way to phrase it besides that. And that means that there has to be some kind of cost-benefit analysis with everything that you do. So say 90% of your kids don't get a concept yet. Well, that means it's worth it to you as a teacher, and it's your job to continue to go over the concept until they get it. Now, let's say only 10% of kids don't get a concept yet. It is your job pretty much to move on to the next thing. Because your job is to get as many kids as possible to meet the criteria. So that means, the bottom 10% in a lot of cases, out of necessity, are kind of skimmed over by their primary teacher. Now, there's all kinds of ROI and intervention steps that do happen for those unfortunate kids that are at the bottom, but that means that most of the time in their main classroom they're behind. The other thing teachers have to do as part of their job is they kind of there's a lot of engagement, for instance, is a buzzword in teaching, and one of the things teachers like to do in order to prove children have been engaged, or in order to facilitate all of the children's engagement, is they have to add steps to learning. And all of the children pretty much have to follow those steps. There's an example I'll use real quick. So I was, working in a first grade class, or not even working, I was a student teacher observing a class, and there's a worksheet that kids have to do for addition. It's super simple addition. It's like 3 + 5 is 8, and so on and so forth. So there was this one kid in the class who knew all of his addition. I didn't know this till after the fact, but the teacher pulled me aside and she says, yeah, on the little Mathia thing that they go on, he pretty much tested out of his grade, and he was, way ahead of where he should have been. So on the assignment that she gave them, they have blocks, and the first thing they have to do is count out 10 blocks or whatever. And then if a problem is 5 + 3, they then have to count 5 blocks and take them away, and then 3 blocks, set them apart, and so 5 + 3, and they have to combine the blocks together, and then they have to count all the blocks again, and have to write 8. So they have to write 5 + 3 = 8. And then there's dominoes also that have dots in them, and then they have to count the number of dots on the dominoes, and they have to write. So anyway, this kid knew 5 + 3 = 8. But by the time he sits down at his desk after having instructions, he has all these blocks. He has this piece of paper that isn't, I could figure it out right, but if I'm his age and he can't read that well yet, she just gave him 3 or 4 steps of instructions to do. He's sitting down at his desk, and he just starts playing with blocks, and then, not quite understanding what all the steps are. And of course, he starts getting frustrated with the whole thing because he thinks it's all dumb, which may be fair. for him. But it just, that's kind of, the blocks may have been very useful to someone else. They weren't useful to him. And I think because his, if he could read well enough, he would have been able just to reread the instructions and find out what was needed and what wasn't needed. But yeah, that's it. And then there was another little guy in the class who was just lost on everything. And so you see him just, for seemed like hours every day, he would literally just sit in his desk and stare at different stuff. And but it's because his skills weren't there yet. And so then you talk to and then yeah, no, he's just really behind. It's like, well, what's going on? What steps are being taken? Well, he has like this other class that he goes to, a couple times a week, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, so the time's just wasted. Like, that can't be fun for anyone involved. But yeah, that's kind of, I may end up becoming a public school teacher, but I don't know that I would want that job. Because there's just so much, again, cost benefit about, who you do need to help, and then what kids do need to stay on task, and then how you're going to whatever. When you're doing things as a parent, one-on-one with your child, your goal isn't really to make them pass any tests or anything like that. Your goal is to give them all the tools that they need to succeed. And the first step of that would be, kindergarten, and just making sure that they know that they are competent enough to handle anything, right? You don't want them to be one of the few kids who's struggling really hard. You would prefer them to have an easy time in school and a breeze. And the most important thing to do to ensure that is to teach reading and reading skills. To really, at any grade level, a teacher is going to give you instructions, right? And then they're going to give you some kind of handout, and the instructions they just gave you are on that handout also. And if you can read well enough and have good enough reading comprehension, then teachers are kind of nice when you have questions, but they don't need to hold your hand through an entire class. That whatever class you're taking will have books the class is going off of. If you can read well enough, the teachers are, again, very nice, but they're not really needed. And that's honestly why reading is such a big deal for me, is it's really easy, if the reading skills aren't there, for kids to get behind really, really, really quickly. And it's, just everything becomes harder if you don't have that foundation. The other thing is, when you're doing it yourself, you're setting a lot of standards with your children, in terms of just their ability to understand your competency, because you're the one teaching them, their ability to understand, discipline and work ethic and all that. They want to know your personality more. If you're doing it the right way, they're not as scared to, ask you questions or ask for help. And it's just, it enriches your relationship if you're, a teacher, as well as, the fun time person, as well as the disciplinarian. It lets them see an entire person, as opposed to just, one hat that you may want to wear with them. But yeah, the teaching methods, though, are incredibly different. When I'm, teaching any of my kids, I don't have to worry about worksheets. I don't have to prove that they've learned anything. I don't need any documentation that they've learned anything. So everything can be done as quickly as possible. I don't need them to go through 6 or 7 different steps to get them engaged, or to try and engage 30 people with 30 different personalities, I know, hey, you like the word poop. That's going to be a letter card. You're going to learn poop, you're going to learn toot, you're going to learn potty. Because when you see those cards, you laugh and it makes you happy, and it makes me happy that you're happy, and it makes the whole thing more enjoyable. Or, it's easier since I know exactly where they are. Like even in just normal conversation, I can, whatever, pick out, oh yeah, that's water. It starts with W. Or yeah, that is a, cat. Or yes, that car did go. Or, just anything. If you're more involved you are in their learning, the easier and the faster it can be. You can cut out steps. Like I don't need, even Big Boy, I don't need him to sit down and try and read a book. He's not there yet, and it'd be beating for both of us. So we can just go through individual words, right? And he says them and we're done. And so all of the, what could be a difficult situation for him, he actually is enjoying. But yeah, that's the difference between teaching one-on-one and teaching in a classroom. If your kid is behind in a classroom, they're going to have to sit through an awful lot of stuff they don't like or don't understand while getting, individual help if they're far enough behind. But if you're doing it with them and you understand how to figure out where they are, what level they are in terms of whether it's math or reading, and then work with them from that, it's a lot easier. Especially with younger kids, right? Because if you can get them good at addition and subtraction and able to read very competently, then the rest is essentially detail. Really every skill is a facet of addition, subtraction, really just addition, and reading. That's it. They may fancify it up by adding the same number a lot of times. Fractions I guess multiplication you need to, but that's essentially it. If you can give them those skills and give them some automacy and give them some, fluency in it, then the rest is just details. And if they don't understand something or whatever, it's really easy for you as a parent to intercede and all that. But yeah, maybe not with higher level math. By the time they're at PEMDAS, that math gets really weird. But beyond that, it's pretty easy.